Thank you for a life worth living. Thank you for the joy of giving. Every day, in every way, tomorrow is the gift you gave to me.
Each of us has experienced the loss of a loved one. Such a loss can be devastating emotionally, and we try in many ways to promote the memory of a loved one. We all want to be remembered, and the gift of life offers a most rewarding way to observe that memory.
I went through this process last year in the sudden loss of my son, Scott Allen Meissner, a 36-year-old man who choked on pizza. In the days following this horrific accident, and as my son lay on a ventilator, my family was introduced to some wonderfully caring people from Life Sharing. They were so empathetic to our plight, and they shared with us how Scott could benefit many others through organ and tissue transplant. In the hours that followed, we grieved the inevitable loss of our son, but we began to realize how he would be able to help give life to many others, even in death. This is the story of a special way to donate life.
Our story has many heroes. They come in all sizes, shapes, and genders. Today we'll learn how you can become one by giving a gift of life. I'm Esther Bloom, and joining us here in the studio are Jill Steinbring, Director of Clinical Services at Life Sharing, Bob Meissner, father of a donor, and Merle Manganello, double lung recipient. Welcome to PACE. We're looking forward to hearing your story. Now, Jill, what is Life Sharing?
Life Sharing is the federally mandated, or designated rather, organ procurement organization that serves the counties of San Diego and Imperial counties, really the bridge between people awaiting an organ transplant and families of donors and potential donors, bridging those two groups together.
How many areas do you serve?
We serve all of San Diego County, all of Imperial County, which comprises 28 total hospitals.
28 hospitals. How many people benefit from one donor?
Well, that can vary, but potentially up to 8 people can benefit from an organ donor and up to 60 people with an organ and tissue donor. So feasibly, very many people can benefit.
How great is your need? Need, I ask?
The need is quite great. Currently, there's over 90,000 people waiting for an organ transplant. Over 2,000 of those are children under the ages of 18. And locally here in San Diego, there's 1,500 people waiting for an organ transplant.
At what point does a patient become a possible donor?
Really, a patient can become a potential organ donor only when they've been declared brain dead by 2 licensed physicians, and those physicians must be independent of the transplant team.
Well, how many doctors does it take to be involved in this transplantation procedure?
That's a great question, and that varies a lot as well. One potential donor can be 8 different really surgical teams that can be involved in the recovery of the organ process. So that will vary, but 2 physicians must declare the patient brain dead, and those physicians are always independent of the transplant surgeons.
Well, why don't we listen to one of the doctors who has his team? Would you introduce him?
Absolutely. This is Dr. Randy Schaefer. He is an abdominal transplant surgeon from Scripps Green Hospital here in La Jolla, California.
It's a huge undertaking, and it depends on the coordination of everyone involved in the team process. Not only the physicians that recognize that their patients can benefit from transplant and send them to us, but the rest of the transplant team that cares for them while they wait for transplant. individuals like myself as a transplant surgeon who perform the transplant operation and then take care of the patient for the time that they're in the hospital and in the recovery period afterwards to make sure that everything goes smoothly for them. When the donation occurs, a transplant surgeon removes the organs from the donor with special attention to make sure that that individual is treated with all of the respect that they deserve.
What comes through to me, Jill, is how caring those doctors must be. And I know that if you have a pink dot on your license, that it designates you as an organ donor. But what can you do well, let's say in the case of an emergency, for example, to ensure that your wishes will be carried out?
Well, the best way to do that is to make the decision to donate in life and register yourself on the California Donor Registry, which anyone can do. You just go to the website, which is www.donatelifecalifornia.org, and then you yourself can register yourself, consent yourself for donation.
Well, would you say that even if you aren't a licensed driver in the state of California, that you can have that designation as an organ donor?
Absolutely.
Well, how would your family know that those are your wishes?
Well, that's why it's really important to register yourself and then make sure that your friends and family know what your wishes are that you've registered.
Well, I'm glad that there is such a registry available, because I always wondered about that dot. You know, it seemed to be sort of meaningless being on a license, that if you didn't have it, if you were the passenger in a car, for example, and you weren't carrying that with you, like, how would anybody know? But that explains it.
Exactly.
Well, how do they learn about it?
About the registration or the registry?
No, I
or
mean, how, let's say that somebody is a passenger in a car and there's no identification on a license, how would the hospital know if they are registered?
Well, they would defer to life sharing, and one of my colleagues or myself would check the registry to see if that person has consented for themselves to be a donor.
Oh, that's a relief. Bob, before your son's death, had you ever talked about organ transplantation?
Not really, Esther. You know, we did have the pink dot. We were aware of that when we got our driver's license. But Scott was a unique type of fellow. He was only supposed to live to age 2, and he lived well beyond that. And we never really thought about that, because truly we thought he was going to outlive us, and so the organ donation wasn't an issue with him. But as far as ourselves, we had put the pink dot on our driver's license.
But at what point, when your son was on the ventilator support, were you approached?
Well, it was probably about 2 days into the process. He had his accident on a Friday, and so the staff of the hospital shifts quite a bit on the weekend. And it was Sunday afternoon that Belen Bell came with another person to talk with us and explain to us what the organ donor program was about.
And what was your reaction?
In our situation, we dealt with Scott for all these years, and frankly, I didn't think there were going to be that many things that might be used, but whatever could be used. We talked about possibly medical research down through the years, but as far as donor of an organ, that never crossed our mind. And Belen explained to us that you'd be surprised what all could be used, and so we consented almost immediately. His mother was there with her husband, and I with my wife. His sister was present, and there was never a question amongst the 5 of us that this is exactly what Scott would have wanted to do. In fact, my daughter sent a little letter to us, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I would like to just close out what she had to say. The machine showed him still breathing. His heart was still pumping. But Scott never again raised his breathing from the ventilator's 8 breaths per minute. He left knowing that he would be helping someone else to live, and that was his choice. And while I cry over my loss, I celebrate his life and his giving spirit. And that's kind of where all of us were. We didn't want to see him go, but we knew at that point there was little hope, and at least this was a way to give even in death.
So it's really at the point when somebody is definitely brain dead that you have to make that decision.
That's correct.
Yes. Well, let's take a moment and listen to Belen Bell, who is the Family Services Specialist.
A nurse and I go together to whatever hospital we have been called to, and the nurse takes care of the patient and I take care of the family. Each family is very, very different depending on their culture, depending on their faith, depending on the circumstances. So we deal with each family as their needs are. We approach them with a knowledge of the circumstances. We try to explain to them. Many times there's terminology used in a hospital that the families don't understand. So we try to have the families understand what has happened to their loved one. And then after that, we wait a little bit of time and we ask them if they would like to donate their loved one's organs. Reactions are very, very varied. You have some very hot-tempered families that react very hot and aggressively. You have very soothing families that are very calm. So we have all sorts of different realms of families and how they react. We attend many different seminars. Not only, there are actually 46 languages spoken in San Diego and dialects. So we either have someone of the family translate if we don't have someone, or we ask for a translator. But most of our families do speak English. I speak Spanish, so we communicate very well. Once we get an approval, I continue with the family until their needs are totally met. This may mean a few hours. This may mean, a lot of hours. It depends. Some of the families leave, and then of course I leave. And some of the families want to stay to the very, very last moment. Not only that, but we also support our families for 2 years. We support our families after 2 weeks with a box for them to put the mementos. We also support them with letters and cards of sympathy. And for 2 years, we follow our families and we send them letters of support. We also invite them to different ceremonies, and we also support them with whatever resources they may need. For example, books or different counseling, and we help them in whatever way we can. Many families do ask to meet with the recipients of the organs, and what we do is we help these families to be able to do this. But before getting to that point, what we do is both sides need to write letters to each other, and then the families who have lost their loved one, of course, are grieving, and the families who receive many times feel a great amount of pain because they feel very guilty that they have lived because someone had to die. When the time comes and the months go by, then if everything goes all right, then we have them meet.
Listening to Belen convinces me that life sharing has covered every base, not just medically, but emotionally as well. Very, very caring. Merle, what was your life like before your transplants?
Well, before I had, I still have cystic fibrosis, which affects the lungs, pancreas, and other parts of the body. And so I was put on oxygen for 24 hours a day. And I carried that around with me, as well as having chest physical therapy 3 times a day. And then after transplant, I was rid of the oxygen, rid of the chest physical therapy, and all I carry around is my medication. I'm free to do so many things.
And why did you get 2 lungs?
Because with the case of cystic fibrosis, it will travel from one lung to the other if I only had one lung replaced. This way, it's a fresh start, if you could say, having 2 clean new lungs. The disease so far has not even transferred from one lung to the other or any part of the body.
Now, did you have a problem adjusting to this new body of yours?
I had trouble and my family had trouble. We had so much energy and a newfound freedom that I could go and do anything and I didn't need to rely on anybody but myself.
And how old were you when you discovered that you had cystic fibrosis?
I've had it all my life, but I wasn't diagnosed until 24 years old.
Really? So how has your life changed since then?
Well, before I couldn't really walk across the street to the mailbox. I couldn't even walk to the bathroom. And this past weekend, I completed the half marathon with not only myself and my family, but also my donor's mom, his dad, and the rest of the family.
And how many miles did you cover?
We covered, I'll tell you exactly, it was 13.1.
13.1.
Yeah.
Wow. And how did you feel after it was over?
Very tired, but really invigorating tired. I just
Yeah.
was so happy with myself, with the whole idea that I could actually accomplish this, because I never ever set a goal, never thinking there was a chance to set a goal.
And how long ago did this take place, your organ transplant?
It was June of 2002.
And in that time, have you worked towards building your stamina, or did it come with the change?
You know, about 3 months after transplant, it started to come faster and faster, and I was able to do more things. I could multitask. I could never do that before. And then when I saw my donor mother running in the marathon in honor of her son, I asked her, will you do it with me next year?
Yeah.
And we did. And so it's next year, and we completed, and it's just wonderful.
That's such a remarkable story.
Oh,
thank you
thank
for
you.
sharing it with us.
My pleasure.
Jill, I think some people may hesitate about becoming a donor because they have misconceptions about things. For example, one that I've heard is that, I wouldn't do that. Only the famous and wealthy get transplants. Now, who manages the wait list?
The wait list is actually managed by an organization called UNOS, which stands for the United Network of Organ Sharing. And the list is prioritized by the urgency of need of the recipient, length of time waiting. Other things like size and blood group are also factored into how the wait list is compiled.
Now, is age a consideration for organ transplants?
On the recipient to receive an organ transplant?
On the donors. On the donors, would they want my tired body?
I encourage people to not rule themselves out, so to speak, that if their desire is to be an organ donor, is to go ahead and register. The science of organ transplantation is always evolving, and things that are happening today, even 5-10 years ago, they weren't happening. So I think it's important to not limit donors by age.
Another concern that you want to say something, Bob, but I'll just finish my thought and then we'll go to you. Another concern that people have is that the donors' families might have to bear some cost.
And that's simply not the case. All charges, expenses related to the process of organ donation, including surgery and recovery fees, all of that is covered by life sharing. The family should not be burdened with any charge related to donation.
Well, I'm sure that there are many questions along those lines, and I think that this would be a good time to let the public know how they can learn more about life sharing.
Life sharing, we have a website that is very informative. It's www.lifesharing.org, and on there you'll find a wealth of information plus a contact information if you wanted to pose a specific question.
Okay, and what did you want to add to that, Bob?
I just wanted to verify, it's my understanding that tissue donation is more encompassing, so people who might not be organ donor candidates, their tissues can be used almost of any age, is that right?
That's right, and you bring up a very good point because there's very few people that can actually qualify to be organ donors because you have to be brain dead first, while many people can be tissue donors. So it opens it up quite wide, and you're right, people that may not be suitable for organ may certainly be suitable for tissue donation.
Right.
It's an important thing to
Even
consider.
those of us that are a little older.
That's right.
Okay.
Well, that's a consolation.
I just want to segue in
Yeah.
that in Scott's case, we got a letter a couple weeks after his death, and some 50 people benefited from either tissue or organs, and it was just really comforting to us to realize just how widespread he lives on.
Right, because Scott was
Yeah.
both an
Yeah.
organ and tissue donor.
You bet.
That has to be a very comforting thought. Now, what programs do you have in place that perpetuate the philosophy that you have about giving life?
Well, we're always, the first and foremost is honoring our donor families. And we have an annual ceremony in the month of November called Day of Remembrance, where we do just that. We honor our donors and our donor families. The month of April is also Donate Life Month annually. And we have, at Life Sharing, we have special things that we do during Donate Life Month. And then we also, just increasing awareness and anything that we can, do to increase awareness of organ and tissue donation.
And what sort of things have you done that make you very visible?
In the community?
Yes.
Well, our volunteers are a big part of that. They're very important to us. We're always needing more volunteers. And those are the people that we send out to the community to speak and to educate students, other, public people in the community about organ and tissue donation.
Do you get any response from young people?
We do, actually. We actually sponsor an artist contest every year that is for high school students, and we get a big response for that. We also do a lot of speaking. Our volunteers do a lot of speaking at various high schools and junior high schools, increasing the students' awareness of organ and tissue donation.
Well, I think if anybody is interested in contacting Life Sharing for volunteering, I think we should post that again just so that they can get in touch with you. And what about your funding?
Life Sharing is actually a part of UCSD, and so of course we're under that umbrella of funding. We also get reimbursement from insurance companies and Medicare, and we also receive contributions that we generally put towards increasing the awareness of organ and tissue donation in the community.
Well, what did you do with the funds that Merle raised?
So they put them towards raising awareness for the organ and tissue donation. And hopefully we'll be able to send a few people to the Olympics. We have a transplant Olympics.
Oh, that's exciting. You must let us know when that's going to happen. Now, what concrete evidence do you have about honoring your donors?
Well, concrete, that's a ironic word that you use. We do have a permanent memorial that is positioned at Greenwood Memorial Park in San Diego, and that was a gift to us that we have put in place to honor our donors and also our donor families. And that is a concrete evidence of our honoring.
Yes. Have you seen that, Bob?
Yes, I have. I went down there, and in fact, I understand there was a dedication ceremony where the families came to the chapel, they had a service, and then each donor family laid a rose at the base of this memorial. Just watching it without the roses was impressive. I can only imagine what it was like with the flowers there that day.
Now, you mentioned earlier in the program that you serve San Diego County and Imperial counties. Are you part of a larger organization?
We are in a way, because all the OPOs, the organ procurement organizations, such as Life Sharing, there's 58 across the country, do work together. And while we always try to serve our own community in San Diego and transplant the people in San Diego that need transplants, if we can't find a proper recipient, maybe based on blood type or size, then we will try to share regionally and then sometimes on a national level. So in a way, we're giving back to our community, but also working in conjunction.
I imagine that there must be a short period of time between taking the parts that you need and transplanting them to somebody else.
That's right. The organs have a hard time being outside of the body and remaining viable. Some of the most vital organs, the heart and the lungs, have a very limited time, about 4 to 6 hours. Other organs, the kidneys, for example, are a little more tolerable of being out of the body, and they can travel a greater distance.
Well, we only have very little time left, but I wonder if each of you has a brief message that you would like to give our viewers. We'll start with you, Muriel.
Well, if it wasn't for organ donation, I wouldn't be here sitting talking with you. And it has been a wonderful experience, although it has been bittersweet.
Well, we're so glad that you are here. It's been a pleasure. And Bob?
I guess my thought would be listening to the recipients at this Day of Remembrance last fall. A video was shown of a firefighter who was near death, and it showed his family around him. The video faded to black, and standing at the podium is this firefighter who got his needed liver right at the end. And to see this man with the potential of going back on duty was just incredible.
Yeah, it certainly gave you confirmation that you did the right thing.
You bet.
And Jill?
Actually, I have two. I can make them quick. The one is working with families, potential donor families, and families that do consent for donation is incredibly rewarding, and it's amazing how many donor families have come to me and said, you know, even in our time of horrible experience, we were able to get a little something good by the process of donation.
Well, thank all of you for sharing your story.
Thank you very much
you.
for having us.
Thank you for a life worth living. Thank you for the joy of giving. Every